And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Hello, I'm David Kramer with the National Weather Service. Thanks for joining for Alaska weather and our aviation segment for the day. Taking a look at our flying weather starting on Saturday morning, we can see the front coming in out over the Bering Sea and Aleutian Islands. It's bringing a lot of IFR conditions with it, pushing more and more towards the coast as we move through the day on Saturday. Up along the Arctic coast, we also have some areas of MVFR and IFR conditions, especially nearest to the Arctic coastline. And then we have some other areas of MVFR down in the eastern portions of the Gulf, as well as in the Panhandle. Saturday afternoon, we're going to fill in a lot more of the Gulf with MVFR conditions, getting more IFR as we get to the western portions of the Gulf. But the northern portions of the Panhandle are actually expecting to clear out to become VFR in the afternoon. VFR conditions along much of the eastern portions of the state, but still some lingering areas of MVFR and IFR right along the coastline of the North Slope. Our front having pushed more into the western portions of the mainland, bringing those IFR conditions in from Bristol Bay through the west coast up towards St. Lawrence Island area, and some more IFR conditions on the Pacific side of the Aleutian Islands and Alaska Peninsula. Then behind that system, we have widespread MVFR conditions extending out towards the western Aleutians. As we move into Sunday morning, starting to clear out somewhat in terms of getting back up to MVFR conditions for much of the Bering Sea, Aleutians, and Alaska Peninsula, but still some areas of IFR by the Pribilof Islands extending up towards the Seward Peninsula. Some IFR conditions along the Arctic coastline as well Sunday morning, expanding out to closer towards the Brooks Range. We have some IFR conditions in south central Alaska, much of the Gulf waters, but getting a little bit better as we get closer towards the Panhandle, with much of the interior portions of the Panhandle becoming VFR. Down south, it is still staying in VFR conditions on Sunday morning. As we move into Sunday afternoon, switching it over to become IFR conditions for the southern portions of the Panhandle and MVFR conditions as we move farther to the north. Out over much of the state, primarily MVFR conditions, but there are some pockets of VFR, especially in the eastern locations. Then up along the coastline, we'll see some IFR, and that will drift down the coastline all the way towards the Yukon Delta area. Then out for the rest of the Bering Sea and Aleutian Islands, MVFR conditions are expected. Looking at the passes, starting up North Anaktuvuk is expected to be MVFR throughout the day on Saturday, as well as at Adigan Pass. Lake Clark and Merrill both start off VFR, but again, as we see that front pushing in, we do expect those conditions to drop down all the way to IFR. Rainy will also start VFR, but drop down to MVFR. Windy will start VFR, also drop down to MVFR. Isabel will be the opposite. They're going to start off MVFR, but improve to visual flight rules in the afternoon. On Mintasta on Saturday, also starting off MVFR, improving to VFR conditions. Tanita Pass should be VFR throughout the day on Saturday, and Portage will start off VFR but drop down to marginal conditions in the afternoon. Down south by Chilkoot and White, MVFR conditions for both locations in the morning, improving to VFR conditions in the afternoon. Taking a look at our freezing levels, we have some of the lowest freezing levels up north, 2,000 to 4,000 feet. You can see this area of warmer air with those higher freezing levels pushing in with some of the pull from that front, bringing up some warmer air from the south to get up to about 12,000 feet for the Alaska Peninsula and eastern Aleutians. Taking a look at our icing, we will have some areas of icing coming in as that front pushes in as well, bringing a lot of moisture with it. Northern locations, we're looking above 4,000 feet for that icing, and some more southern locations above 8,000 feet is expected by Kenai Peninsula and down into the Gulf. For the jet stream, one of the strongest portions of the jet is going to be out by the Panhandle area. Just off the Panhandle out over the Gulf is going to be up to as high as 145 knots out of a northwesterly direction. The other portion of the jet that's moving around the troughing out over the Bering Sea, going to get up to 145 here as well, out of a more westerly direction near the Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula. As we move down to 9,000 feet, still seeing quite a few strong areas of winds near to the eastern Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula. We do have those getting up to 85 knots just south of the eastern Aleutian Islands, 75 knots for the Alaska Peninsula. Diminishing as we move out through the state, but still fairly strong, 50 knots over much of the southwest portion of the state, extending into south central Alaska as well, and 50 knots out there by the western Aleutians. However, out by the Panhandle, quite a bit weaker, expecting some fairly light winds in that area. And down to 3,000 feet, still pretty light for the Panhandle area, but the area of stronger winds that we saw at higher elevations is still going to be true as we move down to 3,000 feet, just weaker winds. 55 knots is what we're looking at south of the Alaska Peninsula. Then up the west coast, 45 knots, getting back up to as high as 55 knots out by St. Lawrence Island. With those stronger winds, we do expect quite a few areas of turbulence. So we'll have turbulence out by the western Aleutians, below 3,000 feet, then below 4,000 to below 5,000 as we move through the rest of the Aleutians up into the Alaska Peninsula area. Southwest area, primarily below 5,000 feet is expected for turbulence, especially in the terrain areas with those stronger winds interacting with the terrain. We will expect quite a bit of that moderate turbulence to be there. With Alaska Weather, I'm David Kramer. Thanks for watching.